With Hashem's loving grace, welcome to Amunah Hour. We continue on with the Noahide commandments. Today's Noahide commandment is the prohibition of murder, or which we prefer to express in a positive thing, the sanctitude of life. How every human life is sanct. Now, the third Noahide commandment that prohibits murder, it's also the sixth of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. Find that in Exodus 20, verse 13. And in positive terms, this, again, is that Noahide commandment that teaches us the sanctity of every life, of every single creation. Now, every creation has a purpose. If you want to understand why every creation is sanct, every creation has a purpose. Briefly, that the Almighty doesn't do anything without a reason. And the Almighty, everything he does for a lofty reason. It's an expression that the universe can't exist for that particular moment without that creation. Okay. Isaiah the prophet says that the Creator formed the earth and established it, and he created it not as a wasteland. What's the prophet teaching us? Isaiah is teaching us that the universe, and all its creations, they were created for an express purpose and not for naught. Naught in Hebrew is the same word as wasteland, something complete waste, something without a purpose. That's the naught. And something wasteland. It's called in Hebrew shmama. Shmama is a wasteland, and shmama means nothing that doesn't have a purpose. It's no word. That's the other word. It brings in Bereshit, in the very beginning of Genesis, that in the first chapter of Genesis is tohu. That before the world was created, there was chaos. Tohu. Okay, tohu means also wasteland and not. Okay, King Solomon says, we learned the favorite passage from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, for everything there is a season, and a time and purpose under the heavens. Now, this passage further emphasizes the fact that each creation not only has its own purpose, but it has its time for greatness. Sometimes you see that the Gemara tells several stories about people that seemed insignificant, and all of a sudden, in one moment, they did something so earth-shaking, something so great. And that's what the Gemara says, that a person won his entire life in one moment. What does it mean that he won his entire life? In other words, he made his entire existence on earth, the significance we see, all existence is significant. For example, maybe think a soldier does something heroic in battle. It's not just that one moment in battle. The soldier prepared himself so long for that battle and training. Everything goes into that one moment. Or you take an Olympic weightlifter and he lifts something. That's not just the one significant moment. His whole life that he's training and he's eating properly and he's exercising. And then it's expressed in that one moment where he gets the gold medal and he stands on the podium at the top and they play the national anthem of his country. But it's just that the Gemara explains that it's significant as if a person came to the world and conquered the world in one moment. In other words, in one moment, we see the epitome of the fulfillment of that person's mission in life. And we all have a mission in life. And one thing, people don't take stock in themselves. They just, they're here to take up time and space. No, a person has to ask himself. We talk about that in The Path to Your Peak, that a person can't live a significant life if he or she doesn't ask himself, why did the Almighty put me on earth? And this is the whole significance of life. In other words, just go and let's watch another YouTube or another text message and another hour of inconsequential surfing on the web or chat room. People squander time when every moment is significant, because the Creator expects us to be doing our soul correction, not just for our individual soul correction, but for the benefit of the earth, the correction of the earth. In other words, you don't know, but you go into a supermarket, maybe there's a cashier in that supermarket that has such a terrible day that cashier is contemplating suicide. You don't know what's inside another person. And you smile at him and you say, something, you're one of the nicest people in the store. I really like every time I come in the store, I go through your kid. Why? You made the person's name. Somebody said something nice to him. You don't know that he might have decided not to commit suicide, that because somebody appreciates him, it's worth it to keep on living another day. You don't know. You go through life, you don't know whether we can save lives, and heaven forbid, sometimes people, they say things thoughtlessly and they could destroy lives. So we talk about that every individual creation is destined to leave a profound mark on creation. Okay, because each person is not only created just come in the earth, but each person is marked for greatness to fulfill his or her soul correction, their mission in life. Okay, now imagine a sophisticated jet engine. Somebody says, "What? Who am I? I'm just a regular. I'm a mailman. I deliver mail to people. It's an important job." Okay, people may think I'm a government postman, and no, what's the big deal? And the person doesn't see an importance to himself, or just one says, "Well, I'm just a kindergarten teacher. I'm just like a babysitter with a diploma, with a college degree." That's not true. That's not correct. You're a kindergarten teacher. You've got souls in your hand. You're molding souls. The Almighty has entrusted souls of children in your hand. The same thing if you're a parent, if you're a mother or your father. Not just a mother or father. People, they don't appreciate their job as parents. As a parent, the Gemara says that you're a partner with the Almighty. Parents are partners with the Almighty because we mold souls. And if a parent has values and educates and inculcates the values and the children, is correcting the life, making the world a better place. Okay, so a person doesn't appreciate himself. This, the world doesn't need me. Oh yeah, prove it to you. Imagine a sophisticated jet engine. Now that sophisticated jet engine, it's got to fly in the highest precision under extreme pressure. And that jet plane flying at Mach 1.5. There's no chance for it. Everything's got to be perfect. So there's no such thing in a jet engine as a superfluous component. There's no extra bolt or needless screw. No, everything is needed. Everything is important. Okay, so any weak or malfunctioning component, down this tiniest component, it could ruin the engine and render it completely useless. And especially when it's functioning at high speed. Okay, so the Creator, he's no less intelligent than that engineer of Lockheed or Boeing or McDonnell Douglas. So the Creator, he's the master design engineer of all of creation. So if he puts a little extra bolt or another extra screw, another leaf on a tree, or another human being or another squirrel crawling up a tree, and although human being is the highest form of creation, the Holy Arizal in Kabbalah, he lists the 4 orders of creation. The lowest order of creation is the mineral. Then there's the plant, then there's the animal, and the highest order of creation is the human. Well, a human being, that's the highest order of creation. There's no such thing as a superfluous human being. That once told the story when we learned about divine direction. We told the story about the Baal Shem Tov, that his students couldn't understand the concept of divine direction. And he told them to follow the first creation they found. They saw a leaf, and they followed a leaf fell off a tree in autumn, and it came to rest on top of a distressed worm who was trapped in a meadow in the sun. And the worm's invertebrate would have been shortly lost its life and dried out. The Almighty sent a wind to knock a leaf off a tree, to go out to save a worm, everything. There's no useless leaf and no useless wind. So if there's no useless wind, that's an inanimate object, and no useless leaf, that's a plant, the next order, and no useless worm, that's the animal, the next order, then there certainly is no useless human. There's no such thing. No such thing. So the Almighty, this creation is perfection. And if people don't believe it's perfection, okay, how many traffic accidents were there today in London or New York or Houston, Texas? Stop and think. Okay, probably a lot. Each metropolis has a lot. No matter how good the traffic engineers are, and no matter how good the signs are, and the lanes are painted, and the traffic lights, they still haven't been able to stop traffic accidents. So the fact that our Earth has now existed in the solar system for nearly 6,000 years, since the beginning of creation, 5,783 to be exact, you know what it means? It means there's never been an accident in the solar system, no planet has ever veered from its lane, because if one time a planet would have veered with lane and collided with another planet, no more solar system, no more planet Earth. Finished. So Hashem, in his infinite wisdom and infinite majesty, the greatest creator, the creator of all of creation, the chief design engineer, he created something called gravity. And every planet has a gravitational force that keeps it in its lane. It'd be nice if the cars were built with gravitational force, where as soon as a car would come near another car, get in another car, it would right away stop or couldn't touch. It would be a magnetic force to prevent cars from colliding with one another. And so like gravity, like every other creation in the world, it's necessary for the proper functioning of the universe. So every drop of water that hits the earth and every molecule of gas in the air, every ray of sunlight is vital. Because what happens, and we're now going back down to the lowest order, okay, a drop of water, that's an inanimate creation. And sunlight, that's an inanimate creation. Okay, the next higher order is the plant world. Every blade of grass, it's positive creation for the world, because every blade of grass, it's vital and it makes its own food. What does it do? It has a process called photosynthesis that it creates its own, it takes the energy from the sun and the water from the ground and makes its own food and takes out carbon dioxide out of the air and puts back oxygen into the air. And the oxygen that the plants put in the air is the oxygen we breathe. Okay, so plants not only give us oxygen, but they're also our main source of food for the animals and for all of us. They're our main source of food. So the third order of creation, above this, the living animals and the fish and the birds and the insects. Okay, and the fourth is the highest order, which is us, the humans. So if the Almighty, just stop and think, if the Almighty does such detail where every drop of water and every grain of sand and every ray of light is important, and every blade of grass is important, and every animal, bird, and worm, what about a human? We can't even begin to imagine the importance of every human being. Okay, so now we're starting to understand, hold it, maybe somebody better think twice before they interfere with the Almighty's plan of creation and take away another human life because it's not comfortable for them. This other human that feels colliding with them, is competing with them business. The people for the dumbest reasons, the way the mafia criminals kill one another, and for money, for the stupid reasons. Okay, King David, he had a magnificent insight into creation. King David was, before people knew what Kabbalah was, King David was a Kabbalist. And he understood the intrinsic purpose of every creation. Not only that, King David, called Perek Shira, the Song of Creation, King David compiled the Song of Creation because he knew which passage from the scripture that each creation praises the Almighty. Each creation praises the Almighty. They have their own passage. Okay, and he could understand. He could understand the language. King David could understand when a rocker would speak, and when a waterfall, the message the waterfall was saying, he could understand the birds, the trees, he understood everything. Okay, but that gave him the ability to compile the Song of Creation, the Perek Shira. And King David, with all his lofty knowledge, he started thinking, what the Almighty created poisonous spiders for? What's the purpose of poison? What's the purpose of a black widow spider? And then he looked at wasps. That's the second creation to understand. He couldn't understand why the Almighty created wasps. Why wasps, they eat honey, but they don't give anything. They'll go and they'll destroy a beehive, okay? And they just take and they just sting. And a bee will sting in self-defense, but a bee is productive. Busy as a bee. Bees produce honey, okay? But wasps, they don't produce honey. They don't produce honey. We say an expression in Hebrew, we don't want your sting, we don't want your honey, but you give the sting, but you don't give the honey. That's the second creation kingdom. King David couldn't understand why the Almighty created lunatics, people deranged people that act violently, that act with no reason, and they couldn't understand that. And there's a midrash called Midrash Ben Sira that tells us a very interesting story about King David. King David once sat in his garden. Okay, these are three things you can understand. The Almighty brought all three together. King David was sitting in his garden, and King David would talk to the Almighty every waking hour. When he wasn't in battle or wasn't sitting in court, anytime King David would be in what we call hibudut, in personal prayer, in solitude and solitary personal prayer, he talked to the Almighty all day long. The 150 Psalms, which is the greatest bestseller in history, that is the protocols of King David's discussions with the Almighty. Okay, so King David's sitting in his garden, and he observes all nature. There's no such thing as King David is daydreaming. He observes, he understands the language of all nature. And here he sees that a wasp is attacking this poison spider. Well, here these two creatures are going at it. It's like he sees a war between Russia and North Korea. Okay, so what's this? He sees these two undesirable creatures going at it. So now what happens? From nowhere, this frenzied lunatic, don't know how he got there, but he got in the king's garden. And he came with a stick, and he started attacking the wasp and stabbed the spider, and he yelled at him and chased them away, and then he ran away. So King David, he spends all day long, his whole life, and dialogue with the Almighty. He says, Master of the world, please, can you explain to me what benefit do you have from these creations? What benefit is there from a wasp? And what benefit is there from a poison spider? And what benefit is there from a lunatic? He couldn't understand. And then he says, a wasp eats honey, wasp eats honey and destroys anything that comes in contact with. A spider spins a web all year long and just can't use it for a garment. You get near the spider's poison. It can maim a person or even kill a person, heaven forbid. And the lunatic lacks sense, and he bothers everyone around him. He upsets people around him. Just goes and making trouble and acting in a wild way, like sometimes wild animal. He said, Master, what do you need them for? At that point, King David heard a voice in his soul, not an audible voice that you hear, but a voice in his soul. And the voice said to him, David, my son, are you ridiculing my creations? There will come a time when you'll have a complete answer on all three. Okay. And you'll know full why I created him. Well, King David, okay, that. They read very short voice and did left. That's it. Shem, when he gives a message, short, and then bye-bye. Okay, well, King David, toward the end of King Saul's life, King Saul had attacked with his psychoses, and he was very jealous of David, his son-in-law, because David was very popular. David was very victorious in battle. And people would say Saul has his thousands and David has his 10,000s, which means Saul has won war against thousands of soldiers, and David has won wars against 10,000 soldiers. And a little bit of slander and a little bit of psychosis, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The King Saul, excuse me, but they just have to explain this is something that we don't understand. The Kabbalah says something deeper that we can't understand. Okay, because King Saul himself was a holy, God-fearing individual. But one of the things we don't understand, he chased David all over the Judean desert, all over the land of Israel, chased him to kill him. And David was a fugitive. He had to flee from his father-in-law, especially after Samuel the prophet anointed King David. If we remember when Samuel was supposed to kill Agag, the Amalekite king, and he didn't kill him. He let him live one more night. And Samuel, next day with his sword, killed him. And he went against Hashem's word. And Samuel said that the Almighty is going to take away the kingdom from you and give it to someone more worthy than you are. Well, that also did not help so much as King Saul's psychoses. So he chased David to kill him. David was a fugitive. David had to run away from Jerusalem and run into the Judean desert. Well, one day, King Saul and his lieutenants were in hot pursuit of David, very hot pursuit, and they almost caught him. And in Judean desert, there were cliffs on three sides, and where David was running, there was this path in the mountains that led into a cul-de-sac. A cul-de-sac is a cliff thrown three sides. The only place to exit is the way he went in. There's nowhere to go. and he hears the hoof steps of the hoofs of King Saul and his lieutenants. They're coming fast on their horses, and they're about to get him. And this is the end. This is going to be the end of David. So he doesn't know what to do. There's nowhere to go, but he sees at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's a cave, a hole in the cave. Well, he doesn't ask questions. He doesn't care what's in that cave. If there's a wild bear, a wild animal, the big poisonous snakes, he's escaping a sure death to get a maybe death. So he jumps in the cave. Okay, jumps in the cave. Meanwhile, the Almighty sends a black widow spider. And a black widow spider goes in the mouth of that cave. In the matter of 30, 40 seconds, that black widow spider wove a web that would take a normal spider 6 months, a year, months and months. Okay, so when King Saul and his lieutenants, they came, there's no place to go. And here, there's no David. And he couldn't see, excuse me, it vanished in a shenir. Thin air. It vanished. And up these cliffs, in the cul-de-sac, they looked. And then they followed the mouth of a cave. They went to the cave. They said he couldn't be in there. Why couldn't he be in there? Because they looked, they saw this black widow spider. You don't go near a black widow spider. And this thick net, very thick net. And that's it. They said, well, they don't know what happened to him. He couldn't be in there. Because if he was in there, then the net would have been ripped to shreds. So they left. As they left, when the coast was clear, it's like in Israel after the missile attack, 30 seconds after missile attack, there's an all clear. They have one siren for the siren to get a new bomb shelter, another all clear siren. So when King David had his all clear siren, then the spider just took its net and folded right back up and walked away as if nothing happened. King David, he thanked the Almighty for the spider, and he realized that that everything is for prayer. The Almighty taught him a lesson, and it was clear. So David emerged from his hiding place, and he saw the spider leaving. He said, praise Hashem, and he praised the spider. He said, spider, blessed is your creator. And he said, blessed are you, master of the world. Who can equal your deeds and your power? For you do everything. It's also wonderful. So King David was so overjoyed at this point. Go look at Psalm 57. If you look at Psalm 57, you'll see a psalm of David when he fled from Saul in the cave. This is the psalm that King David wrote after he was saved by the spider, when the Almighty sent the spider. Okay, this is Psalm 57. So a spider inspired Psalm 57. Okay, thank you, spider, for Psalm 57. All right, so a black widow spider brought Psalm 57 into the world. Okay, so now continue on. So while David was in exile, he was in exile running away from Saul, and he was in Philistine country. That's like, imagine you've got an exiled rabbi from Jerusalem, and he goes across the Gaza's border. Now he's wandering around in Gaza. He's going to be abducted pretty fast. Okay, King David crossed over what was then the border between Judea and Philistia. Okay, this is Philistia is what today's Gaza. And he was abducted by the Philistines. And they saw this as David. They wanted to kill him right there. They said, because here the Philistines are all relatives of Goliath. Goliath that David had killed, he was a Philistine. They took him to the king, and the king was Achish of Gat. Gat was one of the 5 Philistine towns. Okay. And Goliath's brothers, they heard that David was abducted. They right away went to the king. Oh, we got to revenge. Got to attack him. Right. So King David heard the king daughter, Achish had a daughter who was deranged. And she would yell all day long and scream and act frenzied. It drove him crazy. She sounded just like the frenzied lunatic from his garden. So King David started imitating the lunatic, just the way he was yelling at the spider and the wasp and running after with the stick. He started yelling like that too. He says, oh, I'm not going to be no wasp, no spiders here. And the daughter was yelling, oh, you're crazy. No, I'm not crazy. You're crazy. And Achish says to his lieutenants, he said, what did you do? It's not enough that my daughter drives me crazy. You brought me another lunatic to the palace. Get him out of here. So they chased David. They chased David out. And David ran. Okay, so David finally, when they loosened his chains, he ran for his life. And as soon as he reached safety, he thanked the Almighty, because he certainly every creation for a purpose. And now he praised the Almighty's merciful salvation. And were it not for the lunatic that taught him how to act like a lunatic, he wouldn't have been able to act like a lunatic that saved his life. And so that's how King David that's how he was saved. Now, you think the lunatic didn't inspire one of the Psalms? Look at Psalm 56, which is right before Psalm 57, a Psalm of David when the Philistines abducted him in Gat. Okay, that is the Psalm that the lunatic inspired. When King David acted like a lunatic, and that way he spared his life. Otherwise, they would have killed him. Okay, now, but the wasp, okay, so we're learning about the spider, learning about the lunatic, and they inspired King David to write Psalms. Okay. Avner was King Saul's lieutenant general, and he was giant of a man and strong as a cedar. Abner was maybe 9 feet tall and tremendously strong and a great big giant of a man. Well, King David wanted to prove to his father-in-law that he was not an enemy. He wanted to prove to his father-in-law. King David made a plan. King David was a real reconnaissance commando, and he decided he would sneak in to his father-in-law's tent, King Saul's tent, and would take something by King's bedside. It shows he was right next to the king, that he could have killed him if he wanted to, but he didn't kill him. What he did, he snuck into the king's tent and he took the king's water canteen. In case the king is thirsty and he wants to drink it, now he's got a water by his bedside. So King David snatched his water canteen. He could have killed him with a knife or a sword, boom, right there. But next to King David, next to King Saul, his Lieutenant General Avner was sleeping, okay, the big tent. So as King David was crawling out, Avner turned over in bed, and his 2 legs are like size of oak trees, boom, landed right on King David, knocked him down. Avner's still sleeping, he's fast asleep. And King David is trapped under Avner's 2 legs. Uh-oh, here he is. If either one of them wakes up, there, he's finished. He's finished. His life is finished. He's now in the king's tent and trapped. Now, what's going to have to explain that he's in the king's tent? They're 1,000,000% going to say, oh, he came to murder the king. Oh, no. So King David, he didn't know what to do. So he asked mercy from Hashem. And this is, he writes the mercy when he in Psalm 22, the 2nd verse, my Lord, why have you forsaken me? He's now buried under Avner's church. King David, he wasn't such a big guy. King David was average height, average weight. He was small. He was a small lad. Okay. Wasn't the size of Avner. So what did the Almighty do? Just then, he sent a wasp, and the wasp stung Avner in both knees, and Avner's knees recoiled like that. Just as he recoiled, it was like a bridge opening, like a drawbridge opening, and King David made an escape. So now, once more, the 3rd time, the Almighty saved King David's life with the 3rd creation that King David could understand. And then the story says that, any more questions, my son? No more questions. King David never had another question the rest of his life. That's it. The Almighty showed him very well. Sometimes when we have questions about someone, what's this person for? And we end up needing that person. We ended up dependent on that person. Okay, so this is now, I know made a long explanation, but just to emphasize the sanctity of a life that we don't even, we're talking about inanimate objects. Okay, we went from the wasp and the spider to the deranged individual, but the deranged individual, he had a job. His job was to teach King David behavior that someday would save King David's life. Okay, now our sages, they're very thrifty with words. So the above accounts from the Midrash, they show how these seemingly useless creatures saved King David's life in a cogent message from above. So what's the message? We should never, ever diminish the importance of any creation, much less a human being, because any creation has its moment of greatness, and spiders and wasps are no exceptions. I had this in my own life, and the first Lebanon War, that with 6 days we didn't sleep, and wrote about this in the Trail to Tranquility, about that in 3rd person, but it was really in our unit, and I couldn't stay awake. There was a ceasefire on the 6th day, and we had been up for 6 days, and my platoon took the first watch. I could not keep my eyes open, and then we were about to be ambushed. All of a sudden, I got bit by hundreds of mosquitoes. My face was puffy, my arms, everything. They woke me up as soon as I got woken up, and my buddies too. We were all fast asleep, and we saw a rustling in the bushes, and they were about to, not even thinking, just laid back on the machine guns and fired everything we could into the woods, and it saved us. It saved us. We're about to another same day. I had my own life saved by mosquitoes, and it's not nice to be mosquitoes. I use repellent and this and that, but when I get bit by a mosquito, okay, thank you, Shem, for the mosquitoes. Like, the mosquitoes have their purpose in life too. And this is something I couldn't understand why mosquitoes were. And might let me understand why there's mosquitoes in the world. That was in 1982. Okay, so we see that it cannot diminish the importance of any creation. And if we're talking about insects and animals, every human being, it is sanct. So, okay, get a question. We talk about every human being. People ask about, why is a creator? What is a creator? What does he create? Mentally disabled people, mentally disadvantaged people, why special needs children? Why can't the Almighty create every one of them perfect? It was the great of the previous generation. He died when I was 4 years old, called the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Avraham Yishael Kurelitz, one of the greatest scholars of 2 generations ago. When a special needs child or a special needs individual would walk into his synagogue or walk into his Torah, he would stand up. He would stand up as if the head rabbi, the head rabbi of the country was coming in there. Well, his students could understand. And they said to him, Rebbe, why you stand up in front of a special needs person? Okay, then they did today. We like to use nice expressions. Then people didn't use such expressions as special needs. They would say things like, excuse me, but like retarded, and special needs. If you understand anything about Christ, there's no such thing as retarded, there's special needs. Okay. So they said to the Chazon Ish, to Rabbi Kurelitz, Rabbi, we stand up in front of retarded people as if they're the head rabbi. And he said, they're not retarded people. They're holy souls, because these people do not have free choice. So why'd they come in? They came down to the earth because they've already done their soul correction. They're perfect. But they've come down here in a self-sacrificing their own place in the highest portals of heaven to come down and to help other souls be corrected, because they see the difficulty. Sometimes it can be a soul of a loved one, or this and that. I mean, if you said someone in the family that maybe has a special needs child or something like that, you don't know who that soul is. That soul could be a departed member of the family that came down to help correct someone else. Now, why special needs? Because if a person has free choice and they were already perfect, they might ruin their perfection. So the Almighty doesn't want them to ruin their perfection. So he sends them down to help other people correct their souls, and it takes away their free choice. So you could see the families. I know here in Israel, families with special needs children, they're the most special families. No, because the sacrifice it takes to take care of a child that's really extreme on the special needs scale, like really extreme on the autistic scale, to the place where they can't function, or a child that maybe in teenagers still needs diapers, something. The dedication of these families is unbelievable. The character traits of these families and the character traits of the brothers and the sisters, they're so giving. I've never seen a selfish sibling of a family with a special needs child, because they're so used to giving. They're so used to giving. And it's unbelievable. Okay, so this is what the Chazon Ish teaches us, that these souls have nothing to correct. And so you see, a special needs individual has a very important function to do. He came down to do a voluntary function as a favor to the Creator and as a favor to the souls down here that need them. Okay, so if by knowing the Chazon Ish's view, Rabbi Kurelitz's view on special needs individuals, who in their right mind can scoff at a Down child, at a special needs child? It is so painful, so hurtful. One thing I try, we talk about now, we did not murder, anger is something that shouldn't be in our lives. But I have not succeeded to overcome the anger I feel
when I see someone scoffing another human being, and especially a special needs child, to make fun of another human being itself is a transgression of Torah, because the Torah commands in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 17, you shall not wrong another human being. What does it mean to wrong another human being? Insulting. That's like eating pork. That's a worse transgression of Torah. Worse than it, terrible. Humiliating another human being. That's also wrong another human being. Especially for lying or misleading. That's an additional transgression of Torah. Insulting another human being, forget about it. It's a transgression of Torah. And it's such a severe transgression, suppose somebody insults another human being. If they don't apologize, and now comes Yom Kippur, and they're praying, they want to be forgiven. They want to, Almighty, when you ask for forgiveness, you ask me for forgiveness, the Almighty says, first, go ask for the person you're wrong and insult. That's why all year long, it's so scary to wrong another human being. It really is. Don't want to go there. Okay, so why does the Torah have such severe laws against damaging other people? We're not even talking about murder. We're talking about insulting. We're talking about verbal insult. We learned about our lessons in the serene soul about coping with insult. And our last lesson was about the damage of people. This is the insult other people. No way. I don't want to go there because it's wrongdoing. It's all wrongdoing and it's all transgression of Torah. So if insulting or humiliating another human being is a heinous transgression of Torah, can you imagine the catastrophe of murder? Can you begin to imagine? And I know I've been a little bit long-winded to get to this point, but it's only to be able to bring this point home, because if it just started, we said, listen, okay, we can't murder, and there's things, okay, no knives, no guns, no this and that. But to bring it into my heart, this is the way I brought it into my own heart. Prepare myself, wait, stop and ponder. Stop and think of the importance of every creation and the importance of every human being, because every person is critical to proper functioning of the world, regardless of whether or not we know how or why. So opposed to the three lower orders of creation, once again, the mineral, the plant, and the animal, the highest order against the humans, what's the difference between us and lower creations? Okay, the Torah says that we humans are created in the divine image. What does it mean to be created in divine image? We learned 13 principles of Emunah. We learned the third principle of Emunah, that there's no, the Almighty defies any physicality. There's no image. What does it mean, divine image? It means that our souls are tiny microchips of divinity, that the difference between a live human being and a dead human being is the divine soul. Now, plants have souls. They have a plant soul. Animals have soul. They have an animal soul. But only humans have a divine soul, because only humans have the ability to speak. It's our ability, the Zohar calls it ruach d'malala, ability to speak. And this is a divine soul. So when someone takes another person's life, it as if, heaven forbid, it's taking away spark of the Almighty. Now, that really doesn't happen, because the soul doesn't die. Soul goes back up to its source. But the body dies, but the soul doesn't die. But to separate between, the Almighty decides when he needs to separate between a body and the soul. When a body has finished its task on earth, the Almighty thinks it's something we're sad when young people die, but really up in heaven, they're received with a brass band, because if a young person leaves the earth, it means that they finished his soul correction or her soul correction. And that's great. There's sometimes people that are 100 years old and they haven't even begun to do their soul correction. You see these people that are, all they care about their lives is who's going to win between Manchester United and City and a football game. And they don't even stop and think, what's my purpose on earth? What am I doing? And talk about character improvement, work on character, getting close to the Almighty, praying, learning. But think about it. Sit in front of the telly and drink a schooner of beer and watch City play United. This is so many people on earth. They think like that, and they don't. If this is what life is to them, that life is insignificant. So they watch the fights on TV, and they watch people murder each other, and people maim each other, and they watch the news, and they get action when they see countries destroy one another. No.
But what does the Almighty say to Noah? We're learning the Noahide laws. What does Almighty say to Noah? He says in Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6, I will demand the murdered human soul. Edrosh et haneshama. The demand is not the proper word. It's a literal translation, but it means I'm going to get to the bottom of this. The Almighty says, he says that whoever is responsible for the loss of a human soul, don't think that things are erased up in the sky. Like the Hebrews, the T-Pex, I forgot what they call it in English, the little whiteout stuff that blot out a mistake when there used to be typewriters. No, there's no blotting out mistakes. Nothing is forgotten upstairs. The Almighty says, I will demand the murdered human soul, and whoever sheds human blood, that person's blood shall be shed, for man was created in the image of God. You don't mess with another human being. And that's as with the children of the Almighty, and the Almighty says that we were all created in his image. So, since human life means it's got divine soul, and since the divine soul is a tiny spark of the Almighty, and since the tiny spark of the Almighty is sanct, then nobody has the right to take any human life. Man or woman, adult or minor, healthy or handicapped, it does not matter. Because our sages say, and the Yerushalmi Gemara, Tractate Sanhedrin, they say that the loss of one life is tantamount to the loss of a universe, because every person is a little miniature entire universe. Contrastingly, if a person saves another life, it's like saving an entire universe. For example, we talked about encouraging somebody and you save them from committing suicide, you save them from really down and depressed. You know, you think that's something so heroic. You save the universe. Save the universe. You know what? That person may go on to do great things in the world. Imagine that you have some kind of professor that he was insulted. He wants to commit suicide, and you save his life. And the week after, he discovers a cure for cancer. Or some woman, she feels terrible. She's able to argue with the husband. She wants to commit suicide. You save her, and then a couple weeks later, she gives birth to the next great the generation. Who knows? So now I think we're beginning to understand the gravity of the Noahide commandment that permits murder. People say, who talks about murder? Oh, no. Like we say, we need these Noahide commandments for the proper functioning of society. And we have to, I'm going to give a few details, but the purpose of our lesson is not to learn rabbinic law. If you want someone to learn about the little details, every detail of the Noahide law and what constitutes murder, what doesn't, Rabbi Moshe Weiner wrote. He was a Chabad, very, very, very learned rabbi, wrote a big 800 book volume on the halachas, the laws of the Noahide commandments. And so the details are so many. Don't want to get bogged down. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to learn, appreciate them, and to get the overview and to internalize them. So if there's a question in Noahide law, for example, we're going to go in, there's a lot of places that are questions. Abortion. Everybody knows abortion is a no-brainer. Okay, that's taking a life. But what about if the physician says that the mother's life is in danger? Okay, this is something a person can't decide himself. Then right away, you have to get the doctor's complete opinion and go to a rabbinical authority and say, in this situation, is this permissible or not? Okay, so we're talking about, as we do in the end of every one of the laws we learn, we do some general don'ts and do's. Okay, so I don't presume that this is rabbinical law. These are only guidelines, and decisions can change according to circumstances, and every circumstance has its own merits. And if it have merits, then the world wouldn't need rabbis. You have a book of laws, and that's it, and go home. Okay, but there's so many different details, and that's why each detail has involved. Not only that, but in places of life and death. In life and death, but feels rabbinically, I'm like a country doctor. Places of life of death, and especially Noahide laws of life and death. Or in a question, there's rabbis that specialize in abortion. There's all kinds of questions now with the transgender operations and this and that, and it's crazy. This generally is just crazy. But I tell you one thing: don't be jealous of the physicians that are making money doing transgender operations and doing abortions. No, and not unless they're strongly connected with a rabbinical authority, which I don't know if they are. But we don't presume to be final rabbinical law. So in the slightest doubt, somebody has to qualified rabbi. And if you have a question that I can't answer, I'm going to take it further up the line. We go up higher. And oftentimes we refer to a higher authority. And higher authority sometimes refer to higher authority and higher and higher and higher. That's it. That's why people, I say, well, the first thing you want to know when you have a rabbi and a spiritual guide is who's his rabbi. If somebody thinks that he's Moses on Mount Sinai, that he's the final word, no, go far away from that person. You have to know that who his rabbi is, who ordained him, who answers his questions, okay? So since King David teaches us in Psalm 34, verse 15, that depart from evil and do good, first we're going to present a general guideline of 11 don'ts, and then we do 4 do's, all right? So the don'ts, don't number 1 is don't take the life of another human being. Don't number 2 is one may not hire a mercenary to kill another human being. That this is hiring a mercenary as a hitman. Somebody says, okay, his hands are going to be clean. You're going to pay a mercenary to do the dirty work. Also the murder and the Noahide laws. Number 3, one may not perform an abortion or hire a physician to perform an abortion unless halachic authorities deem that the mother's life is at risk. Okay. If the mother's life is at risk, we don't take chances with mom's life. All right. 4, mercy killing, what they call euthanasia, forbidden. No way. And the sick person could say, I don't want to live anymore, but here, make a qualification. A person is not required to do what's called heroic measures. Okay. If a person is not on life support, we could say, I don't want life support. I don't want life support. But once a person is on life support, he may not be disconnected from life support. Okay. A person could decide, no, I want to live life naturally, that what the Almighty gives me. But if the person is unconscious and he's been put on life support while he or she is unconscious, then you can't get off of it. Can't get off of it. Okay, so number 5, one may not hasten the death of another person in the slightest. The Gemara says if a person is dying, somebody else, a third party can't come and even touch the person's eyelids because it might haste the person's death by 2 seconds. What we hear now in 2 seconds, it could be just another 2 seconds, could be all they needed for complete their soul correction, to do great things in 2 seconds. So you can't even haste a person's death by 1 second. Okay. And once when I mentioned number 6, a person is not allowed to disconnect someone from a life support machine. 7, very serious. A person may not commit suicide. Person did not give himself or herself life, and no individual has the right to take their own life. 8, any form of physical assault is forbidden. 9, a person must not cause physical harm to himself. So one thing I don't understand. I had a guy who learned martial arts and he lost his job, and he came to me, and the guy keeps Shabbat, eats kosher. Okay, he believes in God. And he says to me very innocently, he says, Rabbi, I've been offered $40,000 for a cage fight. Cage fight is like the MMA, where these 2 people go in a cage and they fight each other until one can't get up. And I told him, I said, young man, you've got 3 kids. You can't do that. Not only that, if for money, you can't harm another human being. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. I don't understand how a God-fearing person could engage in boxing or engage if somebody get hurt. Or MMA. It's imagine the person is allowed self-defense. Self-defense is allowed, as we'll see. But to harm another person and for money, no way. So a person may not harm another person, nor may a person willfully expose himself to danger. Okay, that's number 10. Person can't expose himself to danger. Number 11, any form of reproductive sterilization is forbidden unless they're overriding considerations of safety and health. Suppose a doctor says to a man or a woman that if you have another child, that's going to be it. Isn't that? Wait a second. I'm going to connect you with my rabbi. You got to speak to my rabbi. Got to hear the details. Can't make that decision. But some people, and I know there's tragedies. I know women had this plenty of times. Women have come to me crying. Oh, meanwhile, they've made tshuva, they've made penitence, they got close to Hashem. But when they were young, they decided to be career women. They're not going to have kids, and they tied their tubes, or men that had vasectomies, but all kinds of stuff. And then they regret it. It is such a tragedy, such a tragedy. You cannot do anything to impair or damage one's ability to procreate, to reproduce. That can't be do. So that's very, very forbidden. Okay, that's the don'ts. The do's, the guidelines, the do's. Do everything possible you can to save a life. This includes adherence to safety laws at home, safety laws in the workplace, and to prevent any threat to lives of oneself and others. In other words, if a person does this slipshod electricity, and he's not an electrician, but somebody could get shocked and somebody get a lot of damages. Say, hey, you're skirting, you're really walking a tightrope with this the Noahide law. Okay, you can't do that because it's endangering a life. All right, so you better pay the money, call the electrician, and don't commit murder. Do everything possible to prevent a murder, to aid a person who is chased. You see somebody, some thug chasing somebody, you have to do, to yell at him or to warn him or to obstruct the pursuer. But this doesn't mean that a person has to endanger himself or herself in order to obstruct the preventer. You do that, I'm going to call the police, or do that, or you call the police. That's a good idea. Call the police. Somebody's being chased. If the person has a weapon and you can't physically stop, if you could have the physical capability of stopping another person, that's terrific. If not, then do what you can. Number 3, people think, oh, the traffic laws are not in the Torah. Oh, well, there is a law that says, Dina de Malchuta Dina, that the law of the land is law. There's no chapter in the Torah that gives the traffic laws on the road between London and Manchester, or the road between New York and Miami on I-95. That is for the states to determine, or the Interstate Commission, or for the royal government to do. Okay, so once the royal government decides what the speed limits are, that is religious law. And to transgress a speed limit, not only do you get a ticket, but this is what the traffic engineers of that particular country or province or state decided, that the safe person is not allowed to break them. People mess up this right and left. You see people that are, quote, religious, unquote, and they're speeding and they don't pay attention to traffic signs, or they go through. I see this all the time. It's really angry, really maddening that you see when pedestrians have a crosswalk. And people that pretend they don't see the pedestrians, they don't stop at the crosswalk. They go through the crosswalk. That is not only a transgression of the law, it's a transgression of the law here, but it's a transgression of Torah. So a person is required by Torah law to observe civil law, which includes civil defense law. Okay, civil defense law says when you hear that siren, you can't walk around the street. That's not going to hit me about. No, you get to the shelter as fast as you can. Okay, so any laws that govern public safety, whether civil defense laws, whether traffic laws, we are duty bound to observe them according to this Noahide commandment that prohibits murder. Fourth, one must do anything to protect against any aggressor in any way necessary. So why do we learn Krav Maga? Why do we learn self-defense? To keep ourselves in shape, that's one thing. But if a person's a soldier in the war, he certainly has to protect himself. But to protect oneself against aggressor, yes, you are allowed to learn whatever you need to learn in order to protect yourself. But you're not allowed to use that to be as an aggressor. Okay. So we see everything, all these laws, it all comes down. King Solomon says, all the rivers go to the sea. It's all emunah. When you believe in Hashem and you believe that every creator has a divine soul, every creation has a divine soul, every human being, tiny part of Hashem, that's it. Nobody's going to go anywhere near to murder. All right, he said, wherever there's emunah, there's no murder and there's peace on earth. And Hashem should give us all peace and happiness and joy. And we should all be able to make this world a better place. Amen.